Hi guys, you're welcome to my channel. If this is your very first time, thank you for tuning to my channel. So in today's tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a simple Ankara bubu dress. Let's get right into the video. For this project, you'll be needing 4 yards of Ankara fabric, and I folded my fabric into two, one for my back, one for my front. Then I went ahead to mark out my border line, which is going to guide me in marking out my dress length. The first measurement I'm going to be using my dress length like I indicated for measurement required. So you mark out your dress length, and for this project I used 60 inches as my dress length. Then you go ahead to mark 1 inch or 1.5 inches as your hemming allowance that you are going to use in folding the hem of the dress. After marking out my dress length, I moved ahead to mark my shoulder width measurement, and my shoulder width measurement I used was 8 inches. I divided my shoulder width into two and I got 8 inches. Then I moved on to marking out my shoulder slant, which I marked 1.5 inches, and I also marked my neck width, which I used 3 inches. And the next thing, I'm going to be slanting my shoulder measurement, touching each point from my neck measurement, touching my shoulder slant of 1.5. Then I'm just going to move that straight down. So the next thing, I'm going to be marking out my neck measurement. I already marked out my neck width, so I'm going to be marking out my neck depth. So for the back, I marked out 1.5, but I later moved on to adding extra ½ inch, so it's not going to be too tight at the back. Then I just gave it a nice curve at the back of the neck. So next thing, after marking out my back measurement, I'm going to move on to marking out my front measurement, which I used 8 inches as the neck length. I also went ahead to mark out 1.5 inches just to give me a square neckline, and I went ahead to connect that in my fabric. I went ahead to connect it, and I've gotten my neck measurement. After getting my neck measurement, when I'm cutting, at that point where I marked out 1 inches, I'm just going to give that place a nice notch, so it will enable me get a nice placket when I'm fixing my placket. And moving on to the armhole, I used 8 inches for mine because I just needed it to be free. But if you don't want it free, you measure your client's round sleeve. So depending on the style of bubu you're making, that will determine the measurements that is required. And another point of how you are going to get your armhole is for you to mark out your bust line. That's your shoulder to your bust point. Then you take it up by 1 inch. Then that point, that's where you're going to use as your armhole. Or if you don't want it too fitted, your bust point, exactly your bust point, or you come down 1 inch from your bust point, depending on the style you are going to be using. Then I went ahead to mark 1.5 inches at that point of my 8 inches, and I ruled a straight line downwards and gave it a nice curve at the armhole. And this is just it. Your bubu dress is ready. You just go ahead to mark out your cut out your front and your back neckline separately, because the two fabric are together. You marked out on one neckline. So I will see you in my next stage. So now I've moved on to joining my shoulder. I just joined my shoulder measurement, and the next thing I'm going to be doing, I'm going to measure out what I have for my round neckline after joining my shoulder. I'll just fold my fabric into two neatly, like I'll fold my fabric neatly into two so that to enable me measure my neckline very well. So from the notch line at the front neckline, you start measuring it down to the center back, or you can start from the center back, the middle point at your center back. You measure it round your neckline. Whatsoever you have, that's what we are going to be using as our placket with additional allowance, just to just for extra purposes. Then when you are done fixing your placket, you can trim that off. So I've moved on to the next stage, and this is me cutting out my placket. So I am going to be using 3 inches for my placket plus joining allowance. I went ahead to mark out my placket width, and I'm just going to cut. And after doing that, I'm going to move on to pressing my placket. And when I'm done, I'm going to come and show you how it's looking like. So before then, and this is my placket, I just trying to confirm the measurements I'm using for the neck width. I'll just put it round my neckline. I'm going to put it around my neckline just to be safe, or just to know if I have exactly what I got. And I've moved on to sewing my placket after adding my interfacing, and this is how my placket is looking after I've added my interfacing. So this is the final look of the bubu dress. So I'm giving it a nice press before I'll move on to the next stage of the sewing. Just if you have light, you can iron it just for the squared parts to come out very nice. Then if you have an overlocking machine, do well to overlock yours when you are done. So I'm going to be joining these two plackets together, and the Ankara piece, I'm just going to be picking out the Ankara piece because I'm not going to be sewing sewing a visible line at the front of the fabric. So I'll just pick out my placket and the Ankara piece at the back of the dress, and once I'm done, I'll come and show you how it looks. Okay, I'm done sewing it, and this is the final look. This is my Ankara piece, and this is the placket. I just joined them together, and I did not sew it at the front of the fabric. So I'm done with it, and I just trimmed out the excess that was left in the fabric. So once I'm done with that, this is how my fabric is looking. There's no extra seam, there's no seam at the front. Then we are done with that. I also went ahead to add a band at my sleeve. So if you are comfortable adding band, if you don't want band, you can go ahead to fold your round sleeve, your round armhole. You can just go ahead to fold it, but I added my band, and I'm just going to trim out the excess at my band. And when I'm done, we'll move on to the next stage, which is adding the design on my fabric, because there's extra design on the dress. So I went ahead to mark out the measurement of what I need for my design outfit. So I used 7 inches for one side and 7 inches for the other side, which gave me a total of 14 inches. So I used 14 inches for the width of my I used 14 inches for the width of my design, and I'm just going to roll a straight line downwards. Like, I'll just get a square fabric before I'll go ahead to mark out my design. So I'm just giving it a slight curve. So depending on you, you can play around with whatever design you choose to do. If you are going to do a complete square, then at the hem you can just give it a slanted shape. Is up to you, depending on whatever design you choose to use at this point. There's no restriction in spreading your design choice, so just feel free to explore. So I'm going to mark out my allowance. I just want to mark out my allowance after I've decided on the design I want to I want to do. So I'm just going to mark out half an inch allowance, folding allowance on my dress. Then once I'm done doing that, we'll move on to adding our interfacing. So it's up to you if you want to add interfacing. But I went ahead to add my interfacing, and I've already ironed the edges, and this is my final look. Just if there is light, you can iron your um design out, so it will enable you sew it on your fabric without much stress. And I'll move ahead to add pinning it on my garment. So this is me, I'm just pinning the design put on the dress, so it's going to be easy for me to join when I'm joining my dress. So I'm going to move on to joining it, and I'm done joining my um design, and this is how it's looking. So I'm going to take it now to the mannequin, so we are going to see how the dress turned out to be. It's just a very simple bubu dress that you are going to love. Wow, this is so beautiful. Like, I'm like looking at it right now, I'm just so excited and I'm happy because it's giving me so much joy. I also went ahead to add design on the placket and the design. I just added some pearls on it just so it does not look plain, and so just giving everything. I hope you learned something new today. See you in my next video. Bye.